With that, I'll go ahead and cover our typical office hours content that I want to remind everyone of. We do have this weekly office hours from 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific time weekly. This will be our last one for our US and EMEA folks until the new year. We'll be taking a holiday break and we'll be returning in January. And so there is a blog post that details out. And then we do have our monthly APAC office hours as well for individuals in the APAC time zone. That's on the second Wednesday of each month from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. We'll have an office hours next week for APAC, and then we'll resume in January. So with the monthly, we'll keep those going as well. We have some document updates, especially around Ignite, that I want to highlight. In particular, we have a number of items around our vector store that we've been updating and some of our different AI services and connectors as well as within our prompt engineering section, some of that work there within those pages. And so if you haven't had a chance to take a look at our documentation recently, we've been making a lot of changes. I'll put some links to some of the content I'm going to share in the chat as well. And then on the next slide, I want to make sure that everyone knows that our backlog by bucket, we have a link for that in chat as well, but there's a number of areas that we'll be looking at in the new year, being able to prioritize. And so we're going through as a team right now and looking at our roadmap. And so we'll have an updated roadmap blog out shortly that will cover some of those updates. But if you're wanting to look right now and see what's in our backlog, this is a really great way to be able to look through. And then moving on to some of our blogs that we've had, there's been a lot of announcements from our Ignite time. And so if you haven't had a chance to look through all of our different customer case studies, there's a number of different ones with Elastic and Fujitsu and Centauri that are great to be able to look through. I want to highlight that we have a blog out in Chinese. And so if you have colleagues or individuals who are native Chinese speakers and wanting to go through semantic kernel content, we have a blog out for you. And then we also have an update for Azure AI Foundry as well that I've linked to. And then the one thing I want to take a minute to highlight, we really appreciate all of you within the community and all that you've done as well as feedback. But I'm going to put a link in chat to be able to go through our survey as well. Would love to be able to share that out with folks as well.
All right, Sophia, do you want me to take over?
That would be great. My Teams just crashed on my
Oh, no.
PC, so I'm just getting that back up.
Okay, no problem. Perfect. Well, let me share my screen here. Awesome. So we thought what we do today for office hours is do a bit of a recap. I just put a ton of links into the chat for the folks that are there. Perfect. So let's maybe get started. We'll go through a little bit of what we covered at the Ignite demo, which is also a link in the chat. We won't go through some of the customers that we had on stage, but that was recorded, so you can go and check that out. So a few things that we did cover. I know we met a lot of folks at Ignite. So for the people that were there, thank you for stopping by and saying hello to the team as we were working the different Microsoft AI booths. And what we also have done is we invited a lot more folks to this call. So I see a lot of new faces. So thanks for joining. So a few things, just if you are brand new to Semantic Kernel, we'll go through that. Semantic Kernel is enterprise ready. We announced 1.0 for our .NET kernel over a year ago now. So that's been exciting to have. We announced 1.0 for Python and for Java back in May of this year, so just a few months ago. And really since then, we've seen a lot of great usage. It's been awesome to see. We have over 1.2 million downloads now of the Python kernel for Semantic Kernel and 2.2 million downloads for .NET. So it's awesome to see the usage continue to grow and even grow faster, faster pace. We also announced at Ignite for the first time We have over 1 billion calls coming from Semantic Kernel into Azure OpenAI models. So that was pretty exciting too, to make that announcement and share a little bit about the scale that people are using Semantic Kernel for their AI workloads. All right, so we also did make a few announcements, and you may have seen these on our blog sites. So we have a few new GA packages. We have filters for Python and .NET that allows you to do things like pre a request coming in or post a request going out, call into other services. A lot of our enterprise customers use this for things like responsible AI. You call out to things like prompt shield, see if there's a prompt injection attack coming in before you even get it to the model. So that's available now for no more breaking changes for Python and .NET. We also announced GA for Open API. So these are the Open API specs that you can use inside of Semantic Kernel, again, for Python and .NET. Both of those are GA, with even more features coming in the future. And we also announced our memory package for Python, Java, and .NET, also GA. So now you can start to switch between vector stores. And we'll take a look at a quick demo of what that looks like in just a second. So pretty nice there. Speaking of .NET, we also, the .NET conference was just a few weeks ago, in case you missed that, where the .NET team was announcing .NET 9 and showing off some of those features. Two of the features I wanted to call out come from Semantic Kernel. So one is our Microsoft.semantickernel.abstractions is now Microsoft.extensions.ai. So we did a fork of that and been making a lot of changes there. So that'll come directly into Semantic Kernel over the next few months. And also the other one, which was big, come on, there we go, is our Microsoft.semantickernel.memory is now Microsoft.extensions.vectordata.abstraction. So that's already baked in. The team's done a lot of work, and that's actually one of the things we're going to take a look at right now. So we'll do a quick demo here. So I can go and I have my console app here. I can ingest a bunch of data. We were actually taking this from our Learn site. So I can go out to our Learn site, and we have all these different connectors for you to use. I can take that Learn site content, ingest it, and then I can start to ask questions of my document. So I can start to ask questions there. It'll go and hit things like my local in-memory store. And I can even do things like go out and grab that. I can go click on links, see that reference documents coming from my vector store. So you can do all your embeddings now inside of Semantic Kernel across a lot of different memory stores and vector stores, and again, even in memory. So take a look at that out at our Learn site, and also in our GitHub repo, we have a sample so you can do this yourself. So pretty cool to see just how easy it is. It's just a few lines of code, and you can switch between any of these. We also had Elastic on stage with us, showing off just how easy it is to switch out between the in-memory store out to Elastic or other providers. So again, take a look at that demo from Ignite. The other thing we wanted to highlight is when you start to build your AI agents, which I know a lot of you are starting to do, you want to get those agents into more places. So where your users already live. So sometimes those are in consumer experiences. You know, maybe you want to, like some of the customers we've highlighted in the past, using WhatsApp with Semantic Kernel to go and allow consumers to hit a phone number, talk back and forth with their agents. You could be using things like maybe Alexa. Years ago, we did a few GitHub posts on that of how to do Semantic Kernel with Alexa. But you also may have some of your experiences for your end customers as enterprises, and that's where I know a lot of you are, where you have maybe Slack or Teams or Office that you're currently using, and that's where your users are. You can bring your AI agents to that. So we also made an announcement there. The Microsoft 365 Agent SDK. You can start to go out to that repo today. It's GitHub/Microsoft/agents. And for .NET, you can already see some samples with Semantic Kernel being that orchestration engine. And really what this allows you to do is, again, get into those channels, meet your users where they are, and you can use this as that that front end abstraction to go into all those different channels, and then use Semantic Kernel to orchestrate and make all the calls like you normally do. So really excited to announce that partnership at Ignite also. All right, so we've talked a little bit about an agent. What is an actual agent? So we'll kind of share this. So an agent is an actor that uses one or more models and allows you to do complex, long-running tasks that can take action on your behalf. And if you've been around Semantic Kernel for a while, we actually came out with our agent framework. It's been over a year. It's been 13 months now since we've announced that. So that's out there for people to use. In fact, at Ignite also, we had a number of customers show off the work that they've been doing with Agent Framework in production. But really, when we think about an agent, there's these three pieces. So an agent has a job. We tell it kind of what is your job description. We give it tools, which are plugins or those functions that they need to call. And then we give it tasks. Hey, okay, now that you know your job description, you know what tools you have access to, we as a user can say, I need you to go help me with this particular thing, this task. It can go do the work for you. So that's really what an agent is. And what we have is, and we'll show a demo in a little bit here, I can have agents start to do work for me, right? So let's pretend I have this GitHub agent. Again, my job is for that agent is to go out to GitHub, to whatever repository I have it go to. We're using Handlebars as an example here. The tool that I give it is that GitHub plugin, so it can go and get into GitHub, look at code for me, and then I can say, hey, I need you to go out to the Semantic Kernel repo and take some action for me. The same thing, we could have another different agent, again, that has one very specific job. So this one's my adaptive card agent, and we'll see what that does in a little bit. But its job is really just to make adaptive cards, right? So I can ground these AI agents into the task they need to do. I tell it what tools that it needs, and then I can go give it a job or that task to be done. All right, so that's really agents at the highest level for Microsoft. The other thing that we have is within our agent framework, which again is available to you use today. We have two different really types of agents. So one you can DIY, you can do it yourself. You can make this agent from scratch. We call these chat completion agents. You give it the instructions. You provide manually the state, the storage, the tools. You wire it up to any one of the services that you want. Your other option is an assistant base. So this is more of a managed service for agents. These are things like the OpenAI Assistance API or the Azure AI Agents service that's available. And there's a lot of other ones that are out there. So you can either build everything yourself as an agent, or you can call into one of these agent systems that are already available. Those, again, are more managed service. So you give it the instructions, it automatically takes care of that state, the storage, the tool calls for you, which is great. So I can start to leverage those, and then I can actually start taking one agent or multiple agents, like my copywriter agent here or my art director. And with the agent framework, I can actually pull those together into a group chat and say, okay, great. I need you to come up with a new slogan for electric car. And then those two can start to work together to get something that looks good, send that back to me as human in the loop. I can approve or provide some more feedback and then have that loop through again. So we have some good options there for you for agent frameworks. And we also kind of showed off some of the work that ServiceNow is doing there, along with Fujitsu. So it was really exciting to see how enterprise customers are using this at scale. All right. So that's kind of some of the big pieces that we've talked about at Ignite. The other thing we hear a lot from customers is what's going on at the macro level. Certainly as Semantic Kernel team, we talk to a ton of folks every day. Also with things like office hours, we hear a lot of information from what people are trying to do. So we kind of see these two things happening. One is people start with something like talk to your docs. This is the RAG pattern that you're probably doing. You can use vector stores. You can take these files, chunk them up, put them into vector stores, and have an AI agent sit on top. So that's an option for you to talk to docs. That's usually where people start, or they start with talk to your data. This is, I want to call into Fabric, I want to call into SQL or Oracle or whatever the case may be. And now I can start to ask questions of my data, pull that data back, very quickly from our users. And that's great. You get some really nice productivity boosts, a little bit of leverage there for those. And then once people get really comfortable using that, they really say, okay, what can we do for our customers, our end customers there? How do I start to do some B2C use cases? So that's exciting to see. We see people kind of start off at that bottom layer, get comfortable with AI, get your users comfortable with AI, build that trust. And then what we see is after you get that baseline infrastructure down, that's where you really start to do things like your agent framework, build agents that use that baseline, and then start to really move up the stack to business processes. So now how can I take a business process that I have, use one or more agents to get that step or those steps completed to really get real leverage for my users, not just 10 or 15 or 20 minutes at a pop, but how do I take their day, take their business processes or those jobs to be done, and now can I really help them save 2, 3, 4 hours of their day not doing tasks that they don't want to do. But again, let AI do those tasks and they can focus on the job that they're paid to do. So we start to see this start to happen. And that's really why we've announced our process framework. We announced this back in September. Really excited to see all the traction and the usage that's getting already. Certainly, as you continue to use it, provide feedback to us, either in GitHub or even on office hours here. So a couple of things, if you're not familiar with process framework, this is kind of the top of the stack to get AI agents to do work that's very deterministic, but you can use your semantic kernel investments that you already have. We can have you collaborate with your business peers to take a process that already exists. You can use AI to enhance and streamline those steps of the process. And this is the biggest one. You'd use process framework to control the process flow in a defined and repeatable way. Again, if you need determinism in your AI solutions, process framework is what you want to use. So we talk about this. There's a few different terms. Processes, that's kind of the overall thing you want to try to automate. Processes have steps within them. This is one or more steps to go complete that particular goal. They're very defined. They have very defined inputs and outputs. And then I take those steps and I put them in a pattern. So I put those in a sequence where I want them to run. So what this looks like is, we'll talk about kind of where it fits in, then we'll show the demo, but we have the process framework. So I can use a single agent in here using the agent framework, which is great. If I have multiple agents for a step, I can do that too. I can use semantic kernel core. So if I just need to call models or prompts or services, I can do that. I can call just basic code that I already have written for years. If I need to create a record somewhere and I already have code to do that, you leverage that code in the process framework to do that particular step. And then I can also do human in the loop. So I can say, well, I'm going to have these agents do some work. Again, when they're done, I need to go ping a particular human, let them review it, provide some feedback, and then give that back to the agent or progress on to the next step. So pretty cool. We're going to look at this as a demo, and then we'll turn it over for your questions for office hours. So at Ignite, we thought, let's have a party now that Ignite was done, because we were there and we thought, okay, this would be great. So we had this party planning process. And what we can do is a few things. And actually, I'm going to make sure I share my audio so I don't forget. There we go. Let's see. Is that going to work for me? Maybe not. Okay. Well, may not be able to share audio here, but that's okay. So what I can do is within my process, I can have a front end. So I need to engage the customer, have them fill out a form and do what they need to do. So I'll press this and see if it'll come in for me.
Are you planning a party or looking for some great drink options?
Yeah, I'm planning a party for about 250 of my best friends. I wonder if you could help me put an order together.
I'd be delighted to help with that. Could you tell me how long the event will last and where it will be held?
Yeah, it's going to be like a 3-hour party, and it's going to be kind of cold because we're in Chicago right now. It's kind of windy and cold out.
Great, thank you. Given the Chicago weather, we'll definitely include some warm options. For 250 guests at a 3-hour party, a mix of alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks will be perfect. We'll want to include beer.
Oh, this looks really great. Can you put together a price list and an order for me and then send it off?
Absolutely. I'll put together a suggested order with a price list for you. Let's start with some essentials. The premium malts, maybe
Awesome.
10
So
pieces.
for this one, we use the real-time API. There's a sample out there in our Semantic Kernel code base in GitHub, so you can check out, mess around with the real-time API and see if that works for you. So for this one, we had a form in the background, and we wanted to put this front-end UI
Oh,
on. So what we've done is we had this front-end UI. I can talk to my agents. The agent was grounded in all of the drinks that Centauri offers, which they were up on stage with us also at Ignite. So we took all of that from the vector store. So we vectorized all of their information. We vectorized the price schemas and those type of things, gave it to the agent, and that way the agent could have a nice interaction back and forth with us. We also gave the agent weather plugins, so it knew, about the weather, about the time, all the things that we needed to get the form filled out. So what we did is we used filters to make sure that, again, prompt injection, data that we didn't want coming in, or really things there, in or out, were there. We also used memory again to go store that information. So the other next thing we did is we took that information when it was created, and we actually stored that directly into our database. So we just did a basic piece there. We also had two agents verify. So we had the one agent collecting the information, another one verifying that the information was correct based on the price and the order. So we used multi-agent there. We used Open API to go hit our database and store that information. And then what we did is we have the backend process. So we'll go ahead and run this.
Hi, I am Bo, and I work at Tailwind Trader as an event advisor specialist. I review high priority orders, and I see one that just came in that I need to review. Luckily, a card is created for me with an overview and a link to the template I have to fill out manually. But today, IT rolled out AI into Microsoft Word that pulls data for me. Rather than logging into the core system and manually copy over the order details, I heard I can just ask it what I want and it will get the information for me. It looks like I can just click on Format Orders and I can enter in the order number. Wow, it just pulled the data from our core system without me having to log in, search for the order, and then manually enter in all of this information into the Word template. That just saved me about 15 minutes, and that is on one order. I will email the customer the link and get this order processed. Thanks, AI.
Yeah, so some of the other things that were announced at Ignite is declarative agents. So that's where we can start to take semantic kernel agents, pull them in more places like we talked about. So ahead of that, we had our card notification agent. This is the agent we talked about earlier where it makes an adaptive card. I can just pass in information. I can ground this agent in structured output to say, always generate my JSON for me for adaptive cards, and then push that into Teams. So that's what we did there. And then, there we go. And then I can do that human validation. As a human, I want to review it, make sure everything looks okay. From Word, I was able to go grab that information, again, using declarative agents, putting semantic kernel in that, calling out to my database, which we saw earlier, pulling that information back, having it formatted, copy paste, boom, in my template, done. And then at the end, and that's using M365 Agent SDK. And at the end, I can go send off an email using Graph or Logic Apps or whatever I want to do to send off my email. So pretty cool. The other thing we announced, I know there was a lot of information there. We have this available for you. This is in the repo. We call these our Metro maps, because you can actually go through. This is available for C# and for Python. You can go to the AKA link. It'll bring you right to our GitHub repo. We have these high-res PDFs that you can download. You can print out in your office on paper. Let's see if I have any. I don't think I do right now. But you can print them out on tabloid paper, which is kind of long. And then you can start to see all the code that you need to get started with semantic kernel. So if you've just gotten started with semantic kernel, if today's your first day or first week, these are a great place to get started. It tells you exactly what to do in order for both of our languages here. And Java will be coming later on, but it'll get you started. It'll show you what to do to get you going, hopefully today. So with that, I think that's it for kind of reviewing what we did at Ignite. I saw a couple links, questions in the chat. Thanks for the links that have popped in there. probably take any questions before we open it up for full Q&A and office hours pieces. Any questions? Feel free to come off mute or raise your hand either way.
Yeah,
or
we'd
just
love
put
to
something in
hear
the
from
chat.
you.
Okay, perfect. Well, Sophia, I'll turn it back over to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Evan. Really appreciate you sharing out and going through that. I just want to cover with my team's cutting out. I just want to cover for one more second our community survey as well. I'm going to put the link in chat. We're looking forward to hearing from you and getting your feedback as well. And so when you have a chance, please fill this out. I'll be posting it out in GitHub discussions. We look forward to hearing from you and getting your feedback as well. So let's go ahead and turn it over to open questions. I see there's a good question in chat from Rajesh. Would you mind coming off of mute, Rajesh? We'd love to hear from you and dive into your question. And then Rajesh, if you're not able to come off of mute, I can just read out what you have in chat too, no worries. So Rajesh has detailed that currently they have RAG and a solution that's using Semantic Kernel and C#, which searches for the user guide document and then gives an answer back to the user. And they're wanting to have a business process workflow to the existing Semantic Kernel solution. And right now, the business workflow is run through a tax process and has to wait until it's completed. And so once that's completed, it prints the tax forms in PDF, and et cetera, and going through that. And so, Rajesh, it looks like you're trying to figure out how to achieve this with the existing RAG solution. So we have a number of team members on, but I'll hand it over to them to dive into further. We may have some follow-up questions as well, if you don't mind putting in chat or coming off of mute.
Yeah, so I'd say the one thing that could be interesting here is the process framework, because it is stateful and long running. That could be a good option for you to, have the user go back and forth. If let's say your tax process takes a while. Let's say there's a lot of validation and things, and maybe it takes minutes or longer to do all the different tax processes before it's ready to print. That could be one good option to say, hey, we'll go ahead and run this for you. We'll do all these other validation steps to make sure everything is fully complete. And then at the end, we can either give back a link to the user to print out the PDF or to give a link out to the PDF to do whatever they need to do. So that could be one good option there. Or if they are going to be in the chat the whole time and you don't need that long running process, you could just use the agent framework to make those steps and make sure you have an agent that again calls out to your different services, waits for those to be returned, and then send back over the PDF to present back to the user. So I think you have a couple good options there depending on how long that process takes.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Evan. If there are further questions you have, Rajesh, as you're going through, feel free to put them in chat or to reach out to us in GitHub discussions. Mark, I see you have a number of good questions. Are you able to come off of mute?
Yeah. I was just wondering, what's the magnetic one? Is this related to semantic kernel or is it something separate? I've seen it kind of mentioned in a few articles. And what is it?
Yeah, good question. So Semantic or Majestic one is available from Autogen. So Autogen is a research project within Microsoft's research. So they have a whole different repo that you can go out and try. Really, it's the state-of-the-art multi-agent scenarios. So I think I put a few links in there for all the links I just pushed in, which is a lot. But we've just made some announcements, and we've been working with Autogen for well over a year ago, really, when they launched, to take a lot of their tech and bring it into our agent framework. So Magentic 1 is something they just released. It's got a lot of good press. It's really interesting thinking and research of how to have multiple agents do some business tasks for you. So as that continues to mature, we'll start to look at that and bring that into the agent framework when it makes sense.
Perfect. Any further questions you have, Mark?
No, that's so it's just that yeah, I mispronounced it, didn't I? I thought it was magnetic, but it's magentic. Um,
It
and
is,
you're
and
saying
I'll,
it's
I'll
just like it's just like at research level at the moment. It's not ready for enterprise
that,
uses.
that's correct. It just came out a few weeks ago. So I'll see if I can find an article and pop it
Is it
in the
something
chat.
I should spend? Is it something I should spend time skilling up, or is it um
It kind of depends on
is
your
that
role,
is
right? If
it
you're
yeah.
Yeah, if you're a researcher, then it could be great to go, dive into. If you need something that's enterprise ready today to do AI workloads, then it may be interesting just to look at to see what's coming, but probably not something that you want to deploy today.
Yeah, I'm an Azure seller, so there's so much to learn at the moment. I want to kind of
Yes,
make sure I'm focused on the right things. So
absolutely.
yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. See a good question in chat from Heinrich that follows up from one last week during our Q&A office hours. Heinrich, do you mind kind of elaborating if there is with the project? I don't know if that was shared last week with Mark and team as well, but just to understand a bit more, we may need to create a GitHub issue to kind of go through the exact error that you're getting, but just wanted to open up if there's anything else you wanted to add from what you have in chat. If not, Mark, was this one tagged as an issue last week?
You say Mark, you don't mean me, do you?
Sorry, no, Mark Wallace, but yes, that's a very good
Oh,
point. There
it's
are
yeah.
multiple Marks on the call.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have an open issue for this. So the additional information from Henrik is very useful. It's good to know it's kind of like one of the older models that's causing the problem, right? But on OpenAI, I think the right thing to do there maybe is just report that directly to OpenAI as an issue, so they kind of get that signal. We get reports about this kind of like problem every now and then, like, so it's good to have extra data that we can share with people.
The funny thing is that it seems to have been an intermittent problem. Isn't that the word in English? It has been there for
Yeah.
periods. Then for example, I I could make it work by changing the plugin name last week. Then from during the weekend and the first couple of days in this week, I couldn't make it work at all. It always failed, and then it started working last night. So it seems to be we have had theories that maybe it's some specific endpoints internally at the OpenAI model that it switches from one endpoint to another or something like that when there's busy time. But it's just rambling because we don't actually know. But it's weird that it
Yeah.
works for some days and then it doesn't work for other days, changing the plugin name to a more or less random name. The Having a plugin called command plugin is a really bad idea. That's that is a given. That has almost always failed, except for the
Yeah.
new models. The new model for OpenAI that seems to work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's a
So
good point, is one of the things you brought up. So when you do your descriptions, and this is probably for kind of everybody on the call, we hear this a lot from our enterprise customers. When you're defining your descriptions for your plugins, you want to be as specific as possible of what these do. Try not to use internal jargon that models may not know. So be as clear as you possibly can, and use positive and negative descriptions there. So if you have two plugins that do something kind of similar, make sure you say this one is for this scenario, for opening up new accounts, not for opening up new accounts for current customers, and then vice versa on the other one. That'll help
But
too. But
you're talking about methods now, functions, right?
descriptions for plugins, for your
Yeah,
tools.
For the plugin as a whole, or for each function in the plugin?
A bit of both there.
because I've actually seen the opposite, that having the name command plugin, which is pretty descriptive when you look at my instructions, because I have a concept called commands, is a really bad idea. Whereas
Yeah.
if I just choose a random name, it actually does work sometimes.
Yeah, command's probably a bit of a keyword there too. So
Yeah, there's
So
probably some magic identifiers that is. For example, if I say command underscore plugin instead of having it as Pascal case, it has a higher success rate.
just to catch everyone up though on the issue that you were facing, Henrik, because I don't think everyone, not everyone was on the call last week. The issue Henrik was seeing was that when he used the term command plugin for his plugin, when OpenAI returned the plugin to invoke, or the function name to invoke, it dropped that part of the function name. We obviously advertise it to the LLM as plugin name dot or plugin name dash function name, but OpenAI was just removing that front piece. And obviously this is a bug on their side, but changing the name seemed to help stop this issue from happening. So they must have some sort of weird behavior
It
around that
helped.
terminology.
It helped, but
You're on mute, Henrik. You're saying something, I think, and then you suddenly disappeared.
okay. It didn't remove the problem. The problem was still there, even if you change the command, the plugin name, but it was not as frequent.
Okay,
It seems to help, not fix the problem. What
right.
seems to have fixed the problem is moving to 4.0, the version from 6th of August.
That's
I
good
had
to
the
know.
default one from May, which had the problem. I've not been able to trigger the error since I moved to the August version. But that also means that the mini has the problem, and there's not a newer version than July there.
Yeah, that's really good to know.
So I
And
can't use the mini version, even
yeah,
though
yeah.
it would probably be fine to use, and it's so much cheaper to use. So I would, of course, prefer to use the mini version, but
Yeah.
that's a no-go.
I think Mark's suggestion makes a lot of sense of like logging this on to OpenAI as an issue as well, so that they know that this is happening.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I can see if I can find a place where to do that. So
Yeah, if you could do that, and then we really appreciate all the detail you have in chat, and we'll definitely follow up with the issue. But if you continue to see any sorts of differences or insights, we really appreciate you providing that back. If there aren't further questions on that, I'm going to go on to our next question. I see there's a fair number in chat, but feel free to keep engaging in GitHub discussions and issues as well, Heinrich. We really appreciate it. There's a question from Ludovic around GitHub discussion of trying to upsert a dictionary of records with Azure AI Search for the memory data model, and trying to see if there's a possibility to target a subfield for embedding. And so didn't know, Wesley, while we have you, if this was an option and a possibility to be able to do.
Sorry, I just missed that as I was looking for something to suggest. Which question was that?
It's the one from Ludovic. Ludovic, would you mind coming off of mute? We'd love to hear from you too, but I'm happy to read it out again if not.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Hello, everyone. My question is just that I tried to use this vector search with the data model with Panda, and then I tried to observe like a dictionary of message as you were uploading in your memory a conversation you have with the agent. So then I'm trying to target, or let's say to just put a vector on a specific text message, which I submit to the AI. I'm in the memory, but also I'm trying to take the whole dictionary to put in the memory, but then I have an issue where the SK framework is just expecting a list instead of a dictionary. So I try to convert that text message, or let's say the history of the conversation, into a list, but then it says it can't iterate through the list. So I'm a bit stuck at this point. I tried to put a bit of details in the GitHub conversation, which I just put in the chat. So that's where I'm a bit struggling at the moment.
Do we have it? I assume this is in Python, right?
Yeah, that's Python.
Do we have any of the Python folks who might, this is quite a Python specific question with Panda and data frames that I'm not really qualified to answer. So is there any Python folks who would be able to help?
I don't think Edward or Evan are on the call. Probably Edward is the right one for this. But I can certainly follow up on this question.
That'd be great, Ben. Thank you so much. So we'll follow up with you. Really appreciate the question. There was another good one in chat that Chris replied to. Thanks, Chris. But just wanted to make sure for the recording we capture. Bill Wilder had a question around both the process and agent framework and how the two are similar and different. So just wanted to give some space to both Chris and Evan C as well, if you want to add anything else to the response in chat.
Chris, you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah, I was giving you first swing at it. I don't necessarily have a lot to add, but just to emphasize, they're complementary. They don't compete against each other. In fact, we've made the strategic decision to not build support for complex orchestration patterns directly into the agent framework, since that would kind of limit their usage to agents only. By supporting these things in the process framework, the patterns become more available generally, whether you're using an SK workflow, agents, or even non-A related components to that workflow. And then so any pattern that works for processes can be leveraged for a variety of contexts. It's not going to be an either or, it's definitely an and. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Evan.
I think that's spot on.
Perfect. If there are no further questions, really appreciate that explanation, Chris, and hope that helps you, Bill, as well, to understand both. I'll go on to our next question I'm seeing in chat. I do want to highlight, Rajesh, I saw the same question posted again that we had replied to earlier. And so if you do have any additional questions, we'd love to hear from you if you want to come off of mute, but I see the same question that we already had answered. So if you do have anything else, feel free to come off mute now. If not, I'll go ahead and go on to our next question, but feel free to put any follow-up questions you have in chat. There's a great question from Bill. Kilday, would you mind coming off of mute? We'd love to hear from you of what you're seeing with your current customer.
Yeah, hi, thanks. And thanks for doing these office hours. These are really helpful. So we have a customer who has a bunch of code already written on the Azure OpenAI library, and they're also using, in part of their code, Semantic Kernel. Right now, they're on pretty old versions. This is like 1.15 of Semantic Kernel and 1.00 beta 17 of the OpenAI, but they want to upgrade those to newer versions. The problem is, because they're a big organization and they want to make sure they're not using any beta dependencies, they would ideally like to move to the OpenAI GA release 2.0. But Semantic Kernel, of course, has to point to one of the beta versions because of the experimental feature support. I did see you guys talk about this about a month ago in one of the office hours. So I kind of know a little bit about like the reasoning behind why Semantic Kernel has to point to the beta versions right now, because it drops support for the experimental features. But I was wondering if you guys had any advice on how we could either talk to the customer about taking a dependency on the beta version, or if there's a non-beta version coming down the pipeline anytime soon, if you guys have heard anything. So that's my question.
Yeah, I think thanks for raising that. I just put some links into the chat. And you're right. I think we did cover this a month or so ago. So Azure OpenAI SDK, I think we'll be making changes probably in the new year to have the GA version with experimental tags, which we'll move to that once it's ready, because we know a lot of people do use the assistance API. So I think for your customer, one of the things to look at is, maybe just ask like, hey, why use both? Like if you just use Semantic Kernel, you're going to get all the things you're doing today, plus all the benefits of abstracting away to any model you want, any service, of those type of things. So maybe worth them if they're going to do a bit of a refactor anyway, or just a quick update. Yeah, go to 1.31 from Semantic Kernel for .NET, if that's what they're using, or the latest Python version, and then go ahead and make those changes. So that way they're ready to go to kind of future-proof themselves. So that's probably the thing to do, is stop calling the current SDK on its own and just let Semantic Kernel make all those calls for you.
Yeah, it would. I don't know if we'll be able to convince them to do that, but it would be nice because, yeah, a lot of the code that they're doing is just semantic kernel workloads that could be pushed off into there.
Yeah. And actually, one thing to add to what Evan was saying is that, I mean, the way the beta package kind of gets built is that it's a superset of kind of like the GA, right? So it's exactly the same code base plus the experimental features, right? So the beta really only applies to the fact that there's some experimental features there, and but they can depend on anything that's not marked as experimental. They'll get the kind of like the same GA level support that they would from the GA package, you know. So
Right. Yeah, I think. Yeah, can you say that one more time? I think I got it. But is it basically if they're not using any experimental features in their code, then the beta version that they're pointing to should still be.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's exactly the same thing. It's really only yeah, the reason we depend on beta is just to get those experimental features. But the way they actually build the code, it's they have one code base, and when they build the beta, they include the experimental stuff. When they build the GA, they don't, you know, but it's the same, right? So if you're just relying on GA features, they should be good, like with the beta package, or they are good with the beta package.
Got it. Cool. Okay, so that's good advice I can bring over to them. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for the question, Bill. It looks like we've gone through the rest of our questions that we had in chat. Thanks to the team as well for replying back and providing links. I wanted to open it up if there are other questions that folks want to come off of mute with. We'd love to hear what you're working on as well, or if there are other pieces that you're wanting to understand further and get details from the team on.
I have a question.
Oh, perfect. Hi, Deepinder. We'd love to hear from you.
Well, thanks for the office hours. This information really helps. I read recently in OpenAI documentation that they recommend that the number of functions that you send to the language model should be between 15 or 20, like, or 10 or 20. If you go above that, then the reliability drops down. So they were recommending that in case a larger number of functions are to be sent to the language model with each request, that function calling, fine-tuning for function calling should be explored. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is that something you guys have worked with, or maybe you have any suggestions on, like, regarding all of this,
Yeah.
the sending larger number of functions, etc.?
No, that's perfect. Yeah, and I think especially for some of your use cases, you may have hundreds of different actions that can be taken in software, right? So you may have a lot of plugins, functions to call. We see this internally too. We have some teams that have 10,000 plugins as part of their implementation. There's a few different ways to do this. So one is we talked a little bit about agents. And you're right, like 10 or 15 is probably a good top end number, even just for testing, not necessarily even if the models continue to get better. That's just a lot of testing to do for each agent. So what we like to see is making agents that has, again, a job description, kind of those tasks that it's going to do, and make those very distinct. What you can do then is you can have an agent that calls other agents to say, my main agent knows the other, let's say 15 agents that can do specific types of tasks. And I can give those descriptions like we've been talking about, or those function calls. And now what I can do is if I say, hey, I need to, do a particular type of task, like look up, my top 10 accounts from CRM, my mainline agent will get that request. It can call and send that response to my CRM agent that, again, has the right tools to do that type of work, that knows all about that particular system. That one can then have those 10 tools to go do whatever task it needs to do, pull back the results to the mainline agent, and so forth and so on. So that's one of the things we've seen. So that's one option, is to make a number of agents that do specific tasks. And that way, just like microservices, you can tune those up. You can give them new things that they can do. It's easier to test that way. The other thing you can do is have all of your different functions available and filter those down based on the request. So some of our customers will use things like vector stores for that, to say, okay, when a request comes in, based on the request, when we go hit a vector store, look up what looks like there's similarity searches for that, pull those particular 5 or 6 functions back, and then go ahead and run those. So you have some options to kind of filter as you go that way, or filter as you go using multiple agents to do particular tasks. And then Demetrio put a couple links in there for the chat too of doing those filters.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. So we are currently looking at the second thing, doing a semantic search for the user request and pulling in the relevant functions. So at this time, we don't know how effective that will be. So based on your prior experience, is one better than the other? Is the multi-agent approach better than the semantic search, or do they both pretty much work, are pretty much reliable?
Yeah, they both work. They're pretty similar. I think the one thing is, if for multiple agents, it's interesting if you're going to have something across multiple divisions or departments within your organization. That's where the different agents work better. So, for example, I can have an HR agent that is kind of tuned up, has the right job description, has those plugins to hit my different HR systems. So if I ask an HR question, it can go on behalf of the user, hit those systems, and the HR IT department can tune that up. Same thing, so imagine like all those different departments. That's where the multi-agent works really well. Or again, if you have, let's say, if you're a SaaS provider or you offer, software, you may have different teams that handle different bits of your software program. So they may also want to have an agent that does something really specific for the piece of software. So that's one approach. The other one is, again, each one can just do all their own plugins, make sure that they have the right descriptions, vectorize those, and then test them. It's really a testing problem at that point. Is if I have 10,000 plugins, every time I add a new one, I need to kind of retest the whole system out. Whereas if I do it agent by agent, I just need to test that one agent.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll try both things out. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Great, thanks so much for the question. Are there other ones that individuals have that they want to come off of mute with? I see one in chat from Brett. Brett, would you mind coming off of mute? We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, sure. So similar to a few others on the call here, currently building out a RAG solution, just using company documents to provide answers to questions. And one request that we've had quite frequently has been similar to like what you would see in the Copilot web, for example, actually have superscript references generated pointing to documents for specific sections of the response. So maybe it's a certain sentence or a list of steps that are coming from a document. So I'm curious if you guys have any recommendations on what kind of post-processing should be done to apply that kind of referencing. Some things I've tried have been using prompt instructions to have the model generate its own references using some kind of formatted output, but that hasn't seemed super reliable in my experience so far. And then as far as kind of algorithmic or other alternative methods, I've seen people recommend, for example, doing a cosine similarity check on individual sentences or snippets from your response and comparing that cosine similarity to your reference documents to check if it was sourced from that document. But yeah, I'm curious if you guys have any recommended processes, documents, or even examples that I could look at to handle that.
Yeah, I think Wesley has some. I'll let him jump in. One of the things you mentioned though is post processes. Yes, there's a lot of pre-process you need to do, which is as you're chunking up your data into your vector store, you want to make sure you add references there too, because you can add your own tags. But Wesley, I'll probably let you take it away because you are an expert in this field.
Yep, and sorry, I guess to clarify the question there quickly, I do already have like linkage to the document, so there is a URL you can click and all that. And so our answers do already have a list of references at the bottom of it. So like that is already set up in our backend data store. It's more so when we're actually generating answers using those chunks, we want to be able to say that this first sentence came from our third reference document. This second list item came from our fifth reference document, that kind of thing.
So yeah, I've had some success when I've asked the LLM to output Markdown as my preferred output format for it to add essentially references inside of the text that then refers down to a list of links at the bottom, similar to how Wikipedia would do it, for example, where you have the little chevron next to the text, and then down below it has a list of links. I think ultimately part of it is going to be down to what type of output format you choose, because not all output formats necessarily have a good way of describing this type of format. But I did found that Markdown was kind of a good way of doing it, and then you can convert Markdown to HTML or something like that. That may not help you depending on what your UI solution looks like, but yeah, it's a tricky one, I think, and you do probably want to just pick the right type of format that supports this type of thing. I don't know if that helps.
Yep, that makes sense. And I guess just to clarify the output there, so we're sending everything back through bot framework. So Markdown formatted answers do work, although that was actually something we had kind of previously tried. And in my experience, it didn't appear that the superscript formatting is compatible with the bot framework version of Markdown. If my memory serves correctly, I don't think Markdown is universally supported, or sorry, superscripting and subscripting isn't universally supported in Markdown.
Yeah.
I guess the one question I would have though is when you were still mentioning you would have the prompt instruction for the LLM to self-reference. Would you have it include like the document title that it was referencing at the end of that certain sentence, or like how would you actually provide that instruction in the prompt?
So I didn't try being that specific at the time, but I did see a lot of variation as well. I think it's probably valuable to be more specific and try that and see if that works. But I did have at least luck with getting superscripts added, when asking for them.
And Wesley, do we have a sample out there? I thought we did.
Yeah, I do have a really, really messy piece of code that I'm processing Markdown files. It is very messy. I am happy to share it out regardless, but yeah, it's not very clean, and it's probably something that I should clean up and just add to the main repo. But yeah, we can definitely look at getting that out.
Yeah, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for the question, Brett. Really appreciate it. I see we have a hand up from Deepinder. This will be our last question. Do you have a follow-up question? We'd love to hear from you.
No, it's not a follow-up question. It's a different one. So just wanted to know if there are any documented guidelines for using complex objects as parameters for kernel functions. Like using simple, like using strings, integers, bools, etc. All of that is fine. But if there's a complex object, as we are building our functionality, we are just discovering that that we have to attribute the classes in a certain way for those to be discoverable. So I was just wondering, are there any guidelines or any documentation that we can refer to?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm just looking through. Sergey, do you have anything to add on this as well? Would love to hear from you.
Oh yeah, I can handle this. So at the moment we don't have any recommendations except of just like common sense. And what we've noticed over the time, and like we've heard from a few customers, is that when you have very complex objects as a parameters of a function, and like with very deep structure, so sometimes LLMs are struggling to provide arguments for those parameters. And our usual recommendation is just to keep those objects as flat as possible and keep the number of parameters as again, as minimum as possible, so that like in order to reduce the odds of LLM to hallucinate, and in order to allow LLM to reason better over it. And ideally, if you want to use your function in LLM scenario, just like make sure that this function is like AI friendly. And especially if you have a control over your function, you can just update it in the way that it's going to like have like not big number of parameters. Those parameters are preferably simple types, and if there's complex types, again, so that like those types are like a flat ones. That would be our recommendation, because it's very easy for LLM to misuse the function, or just to provide wrong parameters, or not to provide arguments at all, because the schema for the object may become very complex, and LLM may not reason correctly about.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that, Sergey. Really appreciate it. With that, we're going to go ahead and end our office hours with questions. If there are any follow-ups, please use GitHub discussions. We'll be taking our holiday break for this weekly office hours for the rest of the year, and we'll see you in January. I put a link that has updated office hour schedule as well. And then if you want to be able to dive into content, we have our recordings posted out. I also wanted to link to our community survey again as well. We'd love to be able to hear your feedback. I'll be posting that out in GitHub discussions as well, but looking forward to getting your feedback. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.